Hello and welcome back, everybody. I will say first and foremost, excuse my quite hoarse voice. This weekend's been a little bit rough in terms of just the heat and everything we've had going on here where I live, so there may be some breaks and stuff in my speech, but that's just trying to make sure I'm not as hoarse as I could be. But today I wanted to take a look at a name and an individual that continually rings in our ears as loreheads, whether you've been reading since the beginning of Destiny's history, but primarily and most importantly recently, ever since Lightfall forward and even before then in the Insight Terminus, and other little pieces here and there, such as Spire of the Watcher, where it became more and more important and this individual came more and more into the limelight in order to show that they are connected to something much larger that we don't quite understand. And that name is Maya Sundaresh. Honestly, for me, I am baffled by how many times I see her name. In my head, it just keeps ringing every time something comes up. It's just Maya, Maya, Maya. It's like she's connected to everything. She's connected to the Vex. She's now connected to the Veil. She's connected to Clovis, possibly connected to Clarity. She's connected to Cade now that we understand that Cade 1 was Maya's bodyguard from what Micah told us when you go through and perform the tasks for her of finding those lost ghosts that still need to be shepherded. And just recently, which is what really caused me to want to talk about this in a video, was the lore card that came along with the Balance of Power exotic legs. These are the new Hunter exotic legs that came with Final Shape, and they came with a very interesting card which helps fill in more of the gaps between what happened with Maya and Essie on Neomuna, between Essie's voice logs detailing the events of what happened and her feelings, and before possibly the entire downfall of just the Ishtar collective and the Exodus Indigo that we now know was the ship to land on Neptune. So for those of you who may need a little bit of a quick refresher, as there is a lot of information surrounding Maya, Maya Sundaresh, Chioma Essie, and some of the other names that might be brought up here are very simply a group of scientists during the Golden Ages that was created through the Ishtar Academy, but this collective of scientists that also worked with like Clovis Bray and the Exos, they are pretty much the pinnacle of science and evolution for the time speaking. They were the scientists that looked into all of the ways that humanity could progress. They were the ones responsible for Siva. They were the ones responsible for assisting and going through Clovis's madness and hysteria with the Exos and making them come to fruition. But now we seem to know that it is connected to much, much more. For those of you who were keen-eyed and keen-eared, on Neomuna, whenever we were fighting Callus in that final mission, we ran into the bottom of the Veil containment and saw the Ishtar Collective logo. Obviously, Osiris gave us a moment there to be like, wait, this is an Ishtar facility. He knows these codes, he knows these panels, he knows these halls. He seems to understand what he's seeing and he's familiar with it. But Maya is connected to so much more. She seems to also be, in my opinion, and this is my theory as of this point moving forward, I believe this conductor that we've now been acquainted with in the end of Act 1, I believe this could be Maya. And I'll explain a little more in a moment, but to catch people up to speed, Maya, in terms of a very brief timeline to provide you on what she's connected to, Maya has been popping up since the earliest inception I know, to try and connect to, even though the connection came at a much later time, was the Insight Terminus, whenever we were going down to stop Kargan from trying to access the Oxa machine, which helped him tell the future. And it was the machine that Scions and the Cabal would use in order to predict and strategize and then kind of move from there. That way they could try and strategize and still be the, warmongering clan that they were. However, that's whenever I first started to notice Maya's name kind of pop around and become more frequent, because Ghost mentions that he was able to see someone else attempting to access the machine, but the identification tag was MSund12, which matches to Maya Sundaresh, but then there's an identifier of a 12 on the end. Now, to go even further back, I believe from the research I've done and what I remember, there was a Grimoire card either very early at the beginning of Destiny 2 or even prior then, and it leaked more into D1, but there was a card that mentioned the Ishtar Collective scientists investigating and essentially doing a autopsy, is the best way I can describe it, on a active Vex goblin that they had. They had the Vex on the table, they were inspecting it, seeing how it would act, and they were just doing research as Maya had a deep, deep interest in the Vex, how they were able to insert themselves into timelines, how they were able to run these simulations that ended up becoming essentially parallel universes that were running at the same time as ours, and how far she could take that. When they decided to lay this Vex down and turn it on, they noticed that the Vex began to run hundreds of simulations of the scientists that it was observing them. It took their information and the surrounding environmental information and made copies, and began running these simulations for these additional copies of the scientists. This obviously sent the collection of scientists into kind of a spiral of who's the real one. And based on just kind of the age-old saying of I think therefore I am, they were able to essentially whittle down that they are the real physical world as they believed from the beginning. Once they were able to determine that, though, they ended up finding out that there were so many more copies in the Vex, and so what they did was to try and recover those copies to do additional research to see, do they act like humans? Like, even though it seems to be just code, how can this work? How is this possible? When they did that, there were some damaged ones, but I think, if I remember the number correctly, they were able to pull 227 undamaged copies of Maya and all the other scientists that were in the rooms. So I like to imagine this as 227 simulated universes that were pulled out of this Vex. They studied them for a while, and then further past that, they decided, we can't keep this on Earth. We don't have the capacity in terms of like storage capacity and any of the technology that we have to allow this code to keep producing what it's producing. It is running as if it is a separate time in the universe, and so this code will just continue to progress and grow and possibly make things. And so what they decided to do with the copies, since they could not keep them for themselves, they decided to upload all 227 copies to the VexNet on Venus. In doing that, that is where I believe this MSund12 may link back to Maya, but this is the 12th copy of Maya attempting to access the Oxa machine from the VexNet. Because, for those of you who might remember, whenever we go into the strike that came out of Lightfall, and we first got introduced to Nezarek and his voice, Nimbus continually mentions that the Cloud Arc has similar gateways as the VexNet. And when we go in, it looks exactly like the VexNet. We've accessed the Vex network even through Neomuna. So now we've not only connected Maya back to the Insight Terminus and accessing the Oxa machine, or attempting to, but also the Cloud Arc, Neomuna, and the VexNet, where Maya had an obsession with the Vex. So now with those connections made, and that's where we come in to the issue with the Veil and its containment and what happened. Just another brief overview of that. The Exodus ships that were sent out long ago in Destiny's history to kind of plant human societies across the universe in order to ensure our survival as a species, there was one that landed on Neomuna. And through all of this lore, we've been able to identify that it was the Exodus Indigo that was piloted by Chioma Essie, Maya, and their scientists. This was able to be detailed out from the Spire of the Watcher lore before Lightfall actually dropped for us, and then furthermore with the items like Winterbite, and of course Chioma Essie's logs that we know of in the Veil Containment. When we finally got the failed containment, we ended up finding out that when Chioma and Maya first arrived, they found the Veil. They located it, they were drawn to it, but they also noticed that the Vex were drawn to it. The Vex started interfering. They had to create barriers and walls in order to keep the Vex isolated from the Veil containment area. But as Chioma details out in her logs, Maya begins to fall into this hysteric spiral of obsession with consciousness and the transfer of consciousness, and that's the only way to maintain humanity, to save ourselves, and to progress. And she ends up detailing that this is not the Maya she's in love with. This is not her wife. This is not what she knew Maya Sundaresh to be. As we listen more and more to Chioma's logs, it gets darker each time we continue. We got one log each week, and with each week it seemed to just spiral deeper and darker and more sadistic into what Maya was doing to experiment with the Veil. It seemed to be speaking to her, whispering to her, and we ended up finding out, tragically, that Chioma details Maya connecting the Cloud Arc as we know it to the Veil. And she was beginning her obsession similar to Clovis, I want to add here, because I feel that there is a very deep connection between what we witness, well, secondhand witness, Maya go through, and the similarities to Clovis, and what I believe is the real clarity object that is not just the dissenter statue as we know it now in the Deepstone Crypt. But Chioma eventually tells us that along with the scientists that were on the Exodus Indigo, they brought along a portion of exoframes that already had human consciousness loaded into them. They were people at the end of the day. Maya chose for them to be the first experiments to try and load into the Veil and or the Cloud Arc using the Veil. Chioma then states that every single exo that was aboard the Exodus Indigo is dead. Maya, from her point of view, has murdered every single one of them. Because the events that occurred were that we took the exoframes, hooked them up to the transfer machines, which if you go to the Veil Containment, you are actually in the room with the chairs that they would have been hooked up to behind you, and you can see where they would have been. But when they were hooked up to this machine and plugged in, they went through a period of mania. They started going just absolutely ballistic, screaming, trying to wrestle themselves out of the chair, and then within seconds went brain dead. Every single exo powered down. The brain inside was gone. The human, the consciousness inside was gone. They were blank, unpowered frames. They were all dead. At this point is where Chioma really decided for herself that this is too dangerous. Maya has gone too far. Whatever the Veil has done to her has changed her, and this is not how we are to save humanity. So we see the rift begin to split Chioma and Maya. But the last bombshell that we were dropped in the Veil Containment lore by Chioma was that when she went to go visit Maya after this incident, Maya was standing next to an exo. One that was moving, talking, alive. And what we end up finding out is, if you remember going through when we were rushing down to confront Callus, we run by what seems to be a singular machine, with a seat lofted up in the air that is connected to a large piece of machinery. And Nimbus's comment is that it looks like a Cloud Arc prototype. This is the room that Chioma describes walking into when she sees Maya in this exoframe. But what we find out is Chioma tells us that that exo that Maya is speaking with, and eventually introduces to Chioma, is Lakshmi 2. That's right, for some of you who may not have known and have stumbled upon my video, Lakshmi 2 from Destiny's History, bringing the one that brought the Endless Night, the Vex into the last city and caused a whole revolt and revolution pretty much within the city, the leader of the future war cult on Earth. She's Maya. She was a copy of Maya's consciousness. The Oxa machine and the machine that Lakshmi talked about being able to see the future with, I believe wholeheartedly, was the Veil. It was visions they were receiving from the Veil. So, with that in mind, that was the last sort of bombshell dropped on us by Chioma, up until we reach the exotic, the balance of power exotic, which I mentioned before. With this, the lore card reads as follows. In my mind, I heard it whisper, "Come and see." Maya Sundaresh sits hunched over a display, the only source of light in her dark office. Brainwave scans of 16 exos read flatline on the monitor. "How is Dr. Ardihai?" she asks into an open mic. "Dead." Chioma's voice is a hoarse whisper. Maya switches to the security camera in veil containment and sees her wife kneeling on the catwalk over Dr. Ardihai's body. A procession of dead exos are slumped over the railings to Chioma's left and right. Maya tabs away to study a bar graph. Neuropathy reports show a spike in activity in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus in the moments before brain death, Maya reports, eliciting a shaky sigh from Chioma over the comms before she continues her analysis. The spikes plateaued for 1/5 of a second, which may indicate a receptor error. We may need to utilize an intermediary rather than direct connections. Do the hard wires show any damage? Maya tabs back to the security feed, watching as Chioma wipes her eyes and then assesses one of the dead exos, checking a thick cable plugged into the back of its head. No sign of damage. Capacitance switches didn't trigger. She swallows down bile. The problem isn't our hardware. It's theirs. Is a whisper only Maya can hear. It's theirs, Maya agrees out loud. I think we need to stop, Chioma finds the strength to admit. Reassess our findings. Resume analysis of the initial electromagnetic anomaly before contact. We can't keep shoveling coal into the furnace, Maya suggests as she leans back into her chair. Chioma is too taken aback by the casual disregard to loss of life to reply. You're right, Maya continues. But we're not stopping. We're reorienting. The Veil is the future of humanity. For a moment, neither woman says anything. There is only the soft hum of electronics in a darkened room to fill Maya's senses. That and a static hiss at the back of her mind. The Veil is dangerous, Chioma asserts. Her voice is tinged with a tremor of emotion. Fear of losing the woman she loves keeps her from pushing harder as they stand on the edge of a moral precipice together. It is. It is, Maya agrees aloud. We must treat it with caution, respect, and also reverence. A thought crystallizes. We must treat it like a knife. Now, with that, obviously, it answers a bit and gives us insight into the situation, but also Maya's perspective in terms of the incident when the Exos went brain dead. But it also shows how little regard that Maya actually has for the fact that she has murdered 16 people in reality. The ending there, talking about treating it like a knife, obviously as being a nerd for the lore and all of the indications we've had of the first knife within the final shape, really made me think, is the veil the knife? Is that the weapon being passed from each race to each person? And with the damage that it seems to cause afterwards, it really does make me believe that maybe this is the weapon. This is the first knife. This is the winnower's tool. Because I then connected to Clovis. I believe that Clovis had the dissenter statue, but I do believe that Clovis himself saw the veil. Everyone who has come into contact face to face with the veil ends up having this obsession with consciousness and transference of consciousness and preserving it, and that is the only way to reach our goals. That's the only way to have purpose. It just connects to everyone. It connects to Clovis, transferring all of this consciousness into an exoframe to preserve humans, being able to reset ourselves in the exoframe in case we become subject to DER. And then we move forward to Maya, now that we know where Maya is going down this same path of everyone has to be uploaded into the Cloud Ark. Everyone's consciousness has to be loaded into the veil in order to preserve them, because the Black Fleet is coming, and this is the only way to save ourselves. And then we go even further to the Witness. The Witness found the veil in order to give itself purpose, but the way that it found that purpose was taking all of the consciousness of the entire planet and putting it into one being to then chase the traveler down throughout the universe. The veil seems to be the catalyst for it all. Now, furthermore into Maya and my theories for echoes, there is a very prominent theory that this conductor that we have met and been acquainted with now, that has taken a hold over Saint after, feeding these ideas into his mind that he is a copy. He is nothing but a fake. He's not supposed to be here. This is not his timeline, etc. The only person I could see being able to have this much control over Vex and be able to assimilate themselves into the VexNet, or they were forcefully assimilated before, and also know enough information to convince someone that they are a fake, they are a copy, this is not their world, they are not meant to be here, they are causing damage, is Maya, or one of the copies of Maya that was uploaded to the VexNet in Venus. This has led me to also believe that the Soul Divisive could very much be controlled by the copies of the Ishtar scientists that we left in Venus, in the VexNet. It makes too much sense that the Soul Divisive is a one faction group of the Vex that does not listen to the hive mind, and the only people that would understand enough about the Vex to be able to direct them is the Ishtar Collective, which was further reinforced to me if you did all of the catalyst missions for Wishkeeper. When we went into the Black Garden over and over again and connected the stars, if you completed all of those catalyst missions, at the end you were allowed to go through a portal. I'll try and see if I can find some footage of it. I'm not sure if I have any from my streams, but I'll definitely show some footage here. But all it does is the portal takes you to a hallway, and when you go to the end of it, you are in a Vex area. It's an area of the Black Garden that is just almost completely taken over by Vex telemetry and geometry, and at the end there is the Ishtar Collective logo made out of Vex geometry. This has led me into a pretty solidified theory that whoever this conductor is may be a copy of Maya that is once again inserting themselves into our timeline and has only been awakened or given this power by the echo that fell into Nessus and punched a hole through the crust, providing not only energy from the light, but also energy from the dark, which we now know from using that in the final shape and actually applying that theory, that it takes ideas and makes them reality. If any of those copies of Maya, or even Maya herself, was able to be assimilated into the VexNet, similar to Ashermere when we saw in the Node Avalon quest, that Ashermere was actually revered enough by the Vex to be assimilated. They did not kill him when he fell, they brought him with them to make them stronger. but he was trying to tell us something about the veil that we're not quite sure of yet. And at this point, if this power of light and dark has made an idea a reality for someone like Maya or a copy of her or even any of the other scientists, that is what's left to find out with the rest of Echoes in Act 2 and 3. But that's briefly where my theory really comes to an end on Maya. That was the brief overview, what I believe is happening, and what I believe connects to a wide web of the veil causing and being the catalyst of all of these wild enemies that we've had, and how it may continue to affect our future. This is obviously not over. It was interesting to finally get a depiction of Maya Sundaresh on one of the final shape location weapons, on one of the Pale Heart weapons, which I'll show here, just so we see that it is a very obvious connection and confirmation that Lakshmi 2 on the bottom end of the image that we get for the weapon is then mirrored on the top by Maya Sundaresh herself. As far as I understand, this is the only photo or depiction that we have of Maya. If there's another one, be sure to let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think my theory is valid? Do you think there may be some holes that need to be adjusted? Or are you now a believer as well? Do you think that there is more connection that Maya has, and Maya has affected our history and our future more than we could ever understand? And, of course, if there's anything else you'd like to hear me talk about or cover, I'm sure I will find a way to hyperfixate on it and give you guys a full breakdown of what I understand and what I know. I do appreciate the love that these videos are getting, especially on the last one with the Drifter, and how I feel he's going to connect even further into the next expansions here and possibly get another running of his own little piece of the Destiny legacy, I guess. This really helps me keep going for these. Of course, put aside the time to record these. I do these usually without a script, so there's a lot of cutting and editing of the audio whenever I either slip up on my words or, want to reword something later on. But of course, I'll be watching for you guys in the comments, communicating with you guys, and just seeing what other theories and information you can drum up for me, and I hope we have some pretty good conversations later on. Other than that, though, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to me continue to yap about my theories and my just deep fixation on the Destiny lore, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.